Now, very pleased to say that our next guest is the former Health Secretary, Alan Milburn, who's been looking into this big review from the government into what is going on with our young people. So he's a man, I should say, who has done an awful lot of work on social mobility in your time in politics as well. These statistics you found are simply unbelievable,
yes.
I just say. I find them quite shocking. 1 million young people not in education, work or training, 58% of them have never had a job.
Yes.
What is going on with this generation?
Well, they are stuck in a perfect storm, and if we're not careful, they're going to be a lost generation. You know, if you go back 20 years, that number was 4 in 10. It's now risen to 6 in 10 of young people aged 16 to 24 who've never, ever been in work. So the problem used to be youth unemployment. If you go back down the ages, it's now not really youth unemployment. These young people, about 60% of them, are not looking for work. And if you're not looking for work and you're not in work by the time you're 24, honestly, by the time you're 34, 44, your life chances are really ruined.
And why is this?
There's a perfect storm, I think, that this generation is sort of suffering from. You know, the nature of the labour market has really changed. Entry-level jobs have gone. Think about the Saturday job.
Yeah, like in a cafe
in
or
a cafe. I was a newspaper boy, delivery boy. I got sacked, by the way.
What did you get sacked for?
Because I was like every adolescent boy. I couldn't get out of bed, and I was supposed to be delivering the morning papers.
We get it. Why would they?
But it taught me a very big lesson. I've never been, well, touch wood, I've never been sacked since. But so those jobs have gone, and now young people feel like, you know, that first rung on the career ladder, it's more out of reach for them, and they're left in this absurd catch-22 situation where employers are asking for work experience, but of course they haven't had the opportunities to get work experience. So, and this is where they get really frustrated. The really great thing, the good news, look, there's a lot of reasons for pessimism, but the reason for optimism is when we surveyed these young people who are NEET, it's a horrible term, but not in education, employment and training, 84% of them want to be in work and want to be training.
Yeah, you see, I was so struck by that stat. 84% want a job, right? Or education. I just feel like part of the social contract used to be, if you work hard at school, university, in an apprenticeship, you get a job at the end of it. And it feels like that social contract has basically broken down.
Yes, I think that is absolutely true. And honestly, as I've been around the country talking to people, whether it's parents, grandparents, employers, schools, etc., businesses everywhere, this is the most visceral issue that I've known in 40 years in politics or public policy. I was going to say there's a concern. It's actually a fear, I think, in society now, amongst parents and grandparents, about the future of their kids, about their ability to get a job, a home, a decent career, a good future. And that's about AI, mental health, the after effects of the pandemic, all of this lack of opportunity in society. The social contract is built on a very, very simple basis, which is you put in effort, you get a reward. Each generation should do better than the previous generation. That's a contract that's been broken. Our job of this generation, we've got to fix it. We really do.
It feels almost like a kind of tinderbox with that social contract breaking down. I mean, are you worried about, you know, in future generations, if we don't sort this out, you know, social unrest?
It's not so much social unrest. What I'm really worried about is that people think that, you know, that contract you talked about, I was brought up by a single mum, and what she always taught me was, you know, and from a pretty poor background and all that, you know, I grew up on a council estate, but she always said to me, if you put in effort, you got a reward. And I guess in my life, you know, I've been very, very lucky, but it's all been really about work and purpose and meaning. That's given me meaning in life. And this is a generation that, if we're not careful, are going to be written off. This is going to be the bedroom generation, stuck in their bedrooms with higher levels of anxiety than we've seen before. And you talk to young people, and it's like, you know, they're so frustrated about this. You talk to young people, and they're doing dozens, sometimes hundreds of applications for jobs. They hear nothing back. And it's the silence that kills them. It dents confidence, but it also kills hope.
How much of this is down to AI, do you think?
Not yet, I think.
But it will get worse.
There's a real risk around AI. AI will create jobs as well, but it, of course, will unsettle the labour market and change it, and that will be a big fear that people have.
Can I ask how much of it do you think is due to government policy? Because some businesses are saying, actually, part of the issue is it's more expensive to hire people now
Yes.
at those low-paid jobs.
Yes, I think that has had an impact, undoubtedly, that is the case. And, the government's got to be very careful, because if you want to maximise jobs for young people, you've got to minimise the risk for the employer.
And what specifically? Do you think minimum wage rise? Do you talk about national insurance contributions or both?
So I think it's all of these things together, but every time an employer takes on a young person, it's always a risk because they're unproven. So the job of government is to minimise the risk, maximise the incentives. But we shouldn't kid ourselves. The changes that I've described in the labour market, they haven't just happened in the last few years. They've been going on for, in some cases, decades. Apprenticeships is a good example. The number of apprenticeship starts amongst young people has fallen by a third in just 10 years. So there's issues not just in the welfare system, but in the education system, the health system. And what we say, our core conclusion is the systems that are supposed to be helping young people from education into employment are no longer fit for purpose. They're not working. And in some cases, they're making the problem worse, not better.
I was really struck by what you talked about when it comes to phones and social media.
Right.
Saying that, look, there's been this big increase in young people claiming sickness benefits, particularly for mental health issues like anxiety. They're not snowflakes. This is a real issue, but it's driven by the fact they're on phones all the time. So what's your feeling on a ban for social media?
Well, the government's looking at that, and I don't know where they're going to go, but we will pronounce on that in the autumn. So we're gathering the evidence at the moment.
Go on, tell us you must have a bit of a...
The evidence points in one direction. Look, we've had a small team of people going around the country talking to NEET young people. These young people are not in education and employment training. And they do this exercise where they start a conversation saying, OK, what time did you go to sleep last night? 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock, sometimes never. So this is a generation...
Because they're on the phone.
They're on the phone. They're on the phone. And the evidence that I've seen, there's a brilliant guy called Professor Peter Fonagy, and I've really relied on Peter's research because, he knows far more about it than I do. And what he says is distress is real amongst young people, and it is leading to functional impairment. So this is lack of sleep, low concentration levels, and so on and so forth. This is a real thing. It's not a fake thing. They're not making it up. Yeah. This is a more anxious generation.
And look, I know you don't want to say before you pronounce it, but it feels like you're saying the evidence is pointing on one way when it comes to social media.
The evidence is pointing in one direction. I really genuinely think it is. I think this idea that you can have a generation, particularly of young kids, who are sat in their bedrooms, late at night, sometimes early in the morning, doom scrolling continuously, and that not to have an impact on them, I think that defies logic.
Do you think Keir Starmer gets it?
Yes, I do. Yeah, no, very much so. And I think, Pat McFadden, who's the Welfare Secretary and has really been championing this work, he commissioned my review. He's up for a really big change.
You obviously work very closely with Tony Blair. You were his health secretary. You were kind of seen in a way as kind of Mr. Blairite in a way. I know that was kind of Tony Blair, but you were number two, if you like. I was very intrigued to see what your view was on his intervention yesterday.
Well, Tony's certainly still capable of making an argument and causing one, isn't he? So he's pretty good at that. He's always worth listening to. And I think what he says about, modern politics, which is for it to work and for the public to believe it, you've got to have an agenda and you've got to have a plan. I think there was one thing missing from what he said. You've also got to have a cause. There aren't many causes left in modern British politics. This is a cause. The cause of the next generation. We had all the opportunities in the world in my generation. We really did. We were very, very lucky. It's shameful that we're not providing those opportunities for this generation, and the consequences will be calamitous, in my view, if we don't.
I know as journalists we're not supposed to talk about the elephant in the room, which is this kind of shadow leadership contest, but I guess is this your kind of rallying cry to Keir Starmer, Andy Burnham, Wes Streeting, everyone, to say this should be your cause?
It doesn't matter who it is. And frankly, we're talking to politicians across the piece. I was talking to Helen Wakely before, who's the Shadow Work Secretary, as we came into the studio this morning. I spoke to Helen yesterday about this. We're talking to all the political parties. This should be an issue that genuinely is an issue for the nation, that actually brings the nation together. And when I talk to employers, young people, schools, local politicians, local charities, people are as concerned as we are about this. And they want to, more importantly, they want to do something about it.
I should have wrapped up about 5 minutes ago, but I find this issue so interesting. I am going to squeeze a very cheeky one at the end. Keir Starmer. should the Labour Party give him more time, or is it time to actually look at someone else?
And I'm really going to duck that and say that's outside my terms of reference.
Oh, come on.
Do you see I went into politician mode there?
You've taken your politician hat off for the whole of the interview. Come on, what do you reckon?
I think the question really isn't a question of leadership. The question is a question of cause. You know, that's what I want to say.
Has Keir Starmer got a cause? Because you need a leader as well, don't you?
It's interesting.
You need a leader to sell the cause.
So Keir's writing about it in one of the newspapers in the Times this morning. You know, I know that this is an issue that he's really bothered about.
Okay.
And the question is, not are you bothered, are you going to do something about it?
Okay. Great to have you on the programme. Thank you
so
very much for being with us. Alan Milburn.